Welcome to Sports Save My Life. My name is Clayton Freck, and I'm the CEO and founder of Angel City Sports. We know the power of sport to change and in some cases save lives. We hear these compelling stories every day, and we created this show to share them with the world. Enjoy the show, and remember to like, follow, share, and comment. So, welcome to Sports Save My Life. Today, I am thrilled to interview 25-year-old Paralympian Dani Aravich. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
All right. Dani was born and raised in Boise, Idaho. She was born without her left forearm and pretty much played every sport you can imagine growing up. She's a natural athlete, competed in D1 track and cross country in college until knee injuries derailed her career. She's a summer and winter athlete, recently competing in the Tokyo Paralympics in the 400. And now she's training to make the 2022 Beijing Winter Paralympics in both Nordic and biathlon. We're going to hear a lot more about that. I've known Dani for a few years, and I have to say, from the get-go, you can just tell she's like a legitimate athlete. She's determined. She's always looking for ways to improve. She stayed in touch with me from that very first meeting, checking in, asking for guidance and support along the way. And honestly, there aren't that many athletes that can go winter and summer. And so she's really a unique athlete. And I think she's going to have an amazing career as she goes forward. So Dani, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Clayton. And thank you for your kind words.
Of course. Listen, if we do this show in 10 years from now, I'm going to have to list like.
Yeah, hopefully the accomplishments build up.
No, I mean, listen, going to games is amazing. Okay, so I start all the shows with this. What comes to mind when you hear the title of our show, Sports Save My Life?
What comes to mind for me is maybe not what traditionally some people would say in terms of sports save their life, as in pulling them out of some dark place they didn't want to be. But for me, I think recently sports saved my life from having a traditional life that I thought I'd have. I was working a corporate career, doing 9 to 5. And while I thought that's what I wanted to do with my life, and I was raised on the idea that you go to college to get a job to earn for your family, I feel like sports saved my life because now it's given me a new path that is untraditional to a lot of people's, but it is so exciting. And now I'm finally finding financial opportunities in it. And moving forward, I just think it saved me from maybe just being in a pattern of my life that was stagnant and a little bit, to me, I might have viewed as boring. And I think it saved me to give me a new sense of purpose and a new career.
That's great. I mean, that's a really unique answer. We've gotten this answer from lots of people, dozens over the last year. When you think about, when you were that little girl playing all those sports that you did, what did it give you, right? To be competing, playing, being out there, with your friends or whatever? Like, what has sports always sort of given you? Separate from obviously your new career trajectory, but like.
As a kid, I would say sports gave me a way to feel like I belonged when I was clearly visibly different from my peers. Being born without my left hand and forearm, my disability is at the forefront, similar to like a lot of amputees. Everyone can see how we're different, and to be able to play sports and compete with other athletes and my peers, despite not having my hand, I think helped earn me respect with them and helped me grow confidence in myself that despite looking different, I had a place I could belong, and that was in sports.
Oh, that's amazing. That's great. Okay. Give me one one sentence, how do you define yourself?
Oh boy. I would define myself as somewhat of an anomaly. Wait, is that the right word? What is anomaly?
Yeah, sure.
Is that? Yeah, that's the word, I think. Okay.
Okay, unicorn.
A unicorn. A unicorn. I would describe myself as an anomaly because I think compared to a lot of Paralympic athletes, I've had a different path to get here. And I am very grateful that I still had my opportunities I did in college and in my corporate career to pursue other things outside of sport. So I feel like no one can put me in one box now of just being an athlete, or when I was an employee, just being an employee, or just being a member of this community. Now I feel like I can identify with the disabled community and the able-bodied community and the corporate workforce and the sports world, and just so many different aspects and different groups I feel like I can identify myself with. And so I guess that, yes, I would say anomaly, like you said, maybe a unicorn, because I don't think I can be identified or tagged as just one thing. And that's why, for example, as I've started training, and I train full time now for multiple sports, I never sought out doing two sports, winter and summer, but when the opportunity came, I kind of felt like I couldn't say no, because again, I just want to be able to do everything and do everything well, which might also be problematic to myself. And as I've continued training full time, I also still work 20 to 40 hours a week in a job that's helping me progress my more traditional career. And I never want to let go of having that, because I want to have all these different aspects and skills that might not just be directed towards job or work or sports. I want to just do everything and be good at multiple things instead of being labeled as one.
Yeah, that's really, well, that's interesting, right? That's almost a way to define yourself as sort of not wanting labels. Yeah. But you're right. Your career, and we'll get into this on the show, but your path to the Paralympics is definitely unique. There are a handful of you out there that kind of cruise through college and aren't really engaged in the movement, and then you kind of find it post college. But, I think also your disability lends itself to that. So as long as you were staying active, if you were a wheelchair racer and you started racing at your age, it'd be so hard to catch Tatiana McFadden or somebody, right? Like they're just they're so far ahead if they have that equipment component and optimizing the equipment, or even the blade runners, right? So hard to catch them if you're injured in your 20s. So your path is cool. And I think it's what it does is, to me, it gives hope to people, with upper limb disabilities, regardless of when you find sport, you can still kind of jump in and potentially have a great Paralympic career. So let's start at the beginning, right? So let's go back to, your birth, and, were your parents, surprised by how you came out? What was the diagnosis, and kind of what do you know about how your parents handled those early days?
My parents had a really hard time getting pregnant. And so they were really excited when they did. And everything with me seemed seemingly normal. And they never saw anything in an ultrasound that would indicate that I would.
And they did ultrasounds, right? Like they literally did the ultrasounds. They just did not see it.
Yeah. I think what they've heard is maybe like the way I was angled in the womb, you couldn't see my left arm. And so when I came out, it was much to their surprise that I was missing a hand. But I think despite them not really knowing anyone with a disability or knowing anyone who is an amputee, they took it really well. I think my dad definitely was worried about like different struggles I might face, just again, because of lack of knowledge of other people with disabilities. I think something that definitely helped give them hope was we started going to Shriners hospitals for children when I was a kid, and that's where I first received prosthetic arms. So they were able to meet a few other families who had children who were missing limbs. So I think that definitely helped open them up and feel more comfortable. And to the fact that they didn't know much about the community, I am pretty thankful almost now that they didn't, because it forced me into able-bodied sports at a really young age. Yep. And I don't think I would have developed as much of as an athlete if I hadn't played able-bodied sports for the entirety of my childhood and into college. And so I was treated like any other kid. I played every sport. We'd spend, the weeks going to soccer practice, and on the weekends we'd go downhill skiing and played basketball, softball, tried out lacrosse, volleyball, did swimming, like every sport you can imagine. And I was really thankful that they didn't see me missing a hand as a crutch. Mm-hmm. And just saw me as their child, their normal child. And they never let me blame anything on it. So if I had a hard time in softball, for example, taking off my mitt and throwing the ball, they would never listen to a complaint and were just like, figure it out. Like, you're going to do it like every other kid. So I'm really thankful that they had that attitude.
And where do you think they got that attitude of just, hey, you need to figure this out? We're not going to give you any empathy, like you got to figure this out?
I think they got the attitude from, they were both athletes for a long time. And so I think they had that already mental side of being athletes, and they were both Division III athletes in college. And I think also it, again, might be attributed to their lack of knowledge of the disabled community, that they didn't ever view me as disabled. And I still don't view myself as having a disability, even though I know technically I do. Because luckily, since I am an arm impairment, I was able to participate in able-bodied sports pretty seamlessly as compared to some other athletes in our community. And so I think, they just didn't know much about the community. And so they viewed me as an able-bodied athlete and never saw it as an impairment, and just made sure I could participate in anything I wanted to, and that I held my head up high and continued to progress through sport and never use disability as a crutch.
I think that's great. And kudos to your parents for kind of having, that approach and that strategy. It sounds like it worked really well for you. I also think, I talked to a lot of parents, looking for guidance on, how do you manage their kids' integration into sport, whether it's, mainstream sport against able-bodied kids or adaptive sports. And, my advice, which is kind of similar to what your parents did, is integrate and mainstream, make it easy, make it fun, find those friends, do all that as far as you can. And just keep an eye on, at some point, some of our kids, right, start to struggle, and then it could affect their confidence. And that might be a time to sort of slide over and focus a little more on the adaptive sports side of things if you need to. But I like sort of pushing mainstream integration as much as we can for a million reasons. But certainly for the athlete's development. And you're like such a perfect case study for that. I think about you and Rod Townsend and Dallas Wise, and we got a bunch of folks on the Paralympic team, kind of similar stories. Okay, great. So you gave us a little rundown of your sports career in those early days, trying all these different sports. What kind of kid were you? Like, did you get in trouble? Were you good in school? Were you a rebellious kid? Like, what kind of kid were you?
I think I was an angel. I'm an only child, though. So I basically had my parents' watching eyes at all times. So even if I probably wanted to get in trouble, I most likely wouldn't have been able to. But particularly like late middle school, getting into high school, I was very academically and athletically focused. And so I probably never did anything on the weekends outside of sports and homework. I was very straight and narrow focused, and it was always my dream to get into a great college. So in high school, particularly, that was my biggest focus, was excelling in school in order to do well in my next phase of life. So I like to think I was a pretty good kid. I probably had some, attitude and some things like that, like any high school or middle school aged child, but for the most part, I was a pretty good kid, I'd say. I think they'd say the same, especially after knowing some of my friends. They think they were pretty lucky.
What's a favorite memory from your childhood that you have?
Ooh. So something that's very special between my dad and I was football. I, obviously being an only child and being a girl, I wanted to still do activities with my dad that might have been more like son-related activities. And so I started watching football with my dad when I was in elementary school, and I picked up on the game pretty fast and really enjoyed watching it. And so he and I, when I was in the 5th grade, started going to an NFL game or a college game throughout the country once a year. So my first game was at an Indianapolis Colts game because they were my favorite team because of Peyton Manning. And my dad and I would always go to a game. And it ended up being, that's what led me to my professional career before I started training again, was I worked on the business side of professional sports. So I worked for an NFL team and 2 NBA teams. And so I think from those childhood memories, that kind of progressed me into what I wanted to do at the time in my business career.
That's really cool. What a great tradition.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot. I took my 2 younger boys on a surf trip this summer.
Oh, nice.
Just because we were so COVID, preparing for Tokyo. Like, it was just such a weird summer for us. And so I'm hoping we can make that a tradition with those my younger 2 boys.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah. And the best part of it, we didn't book any hotels. We just rolled into cities and just towns and just figured out where to stay. So it was really funny. We almost got in trouble a couple of times, but we figured it out, Okay. So talk to me. I know the limb different world pretty well, obviously, because I got an amputee's child, but talk to me about your journey in self-confidence. And it sounds like from your kind of early remarks, sport actually was an important part of your self-confidence in those younger years, in a place where you kind of were proving your self to your friends and everyone around you, and kind of finding your spot. But when I look at like junior high, right, and even into high school, I think those are hard years for everyone. How was it for you as an amputee that really couldn't just wear long pants, right? There's sort of, some of these leg amps can hide it, but you really, it's hard to hide an arm. So, did you have any kind of low moments? How did you get through those? Like, what was that journey of self-confidence?
When I was growing up, I was very lucky that I grew up in a somewhat small community, and I went to school with the same people from about 1st grade through the end of high school. And so a lot of the awkward kind of introductions and getting used to knowing an amputee or knowing someone with a disability, luckily were taken care of at a pretty young age, and they were a very supportive group. But I'd say my hardest challenge was always being stared at in public, which I'm sure every person who's an amputee has to deal with at some point in their life. And what I would do to combat it, because I just hated feeling eyes on me, was ended up getting a cosmetic prosthetic arm, which, for those who don't know, cosmetic, it has basically no functionality besides looking as real as possible to a normal hand. And I would wear that cosmetic arm through middle school when I go out in public, but I didn't want people to be able to see where the arm started. So I would always try to wear a long sleeve shirt and fit about to here, so you could just see the tips of the fingertips on the hand and people wouldn't bat another eye. And I would do that in the summers in Boise, where it would be like 100 degrees, because I just really didn't want people staring at me when I went into public.
And so what years are those, Dani, where you're kind of, wearing the cosmetic arm and covering it up a little bit? Is that junior high into high school?
I say junior high. Yeah. Probably like 5th to 8th grade. And it was, to be honest, like miserable. And it almost, I think I forced myself so much into it that then after I did get to my level of self-confidence, I felt like I didn't need it. I haven't touched a prosthetic arm really since, solely because I think I just made myself in those times so uncomfortable wearing one, and it had no functionality for me at the time. But I think it just took some years of high school, and sports definitely helped. And as I was getting better at sports and making teams, I think that helped elevate my level of confidence, because when I was playing sports, I didn't wear my prosthetic.
Sure.
So when I played basketball, when I was playing softball, I didn't wear my prosthetic. So I was kind of exposed then to whoever was there. And I think that helped develop my level of confidence. And I do accredit a lot to the friends I had at the time, who they could see, when we'd go out in public to do something and I was just wearing a sweatshirt in ungodly heat. They'd be like, why are you doing this? What's the point? That I don't want to get stared at when we're out here. And they were able to make me feel so comfortable that it helped me think, oh, I don't need to wear this anymore. I don't need to cover this up anymore. But like you said, it's definitely, those ages already are difficult for teenagers, no matter what is going on, whether they're able-bodied or have a disability. And so the way I always phrase it is, part of me is kind of lucky because the thing that I was dealing with about self-confidence was just out there for the world already. It wasn't something really internal. It wasn't something that I was really afraid to talk about, but mine was just out there for the world to see, and people could either, like it or not like it or do whatever. But I almost view it now as a blessing that was the biggest issue I had growing up, was that self-confidence around my hand, whereas obviously so many people have so many other deeper things going on in that period of their life. So I'm trying to view it now as a blessing.
And so at some point in high school, like mid-high school, you ditched the fancy arm.
Yes, I ditched the prosthetic arm. And finally, like in the summers when I'd be either, going to the pool or going to a grocery store or whatever it might be, I would wear a t-shirt or a tank top and just let my arm be exposed. I would definitely always, when I took a photo, try to angle my body so you could only see my right side. And I got a lot more comfortable with actually seeing my left arm in photos and videos. I was becoming just more free about it instead of always trying to like shield this side of my body.
And listen, I hear these stories a lot. I see it firsthand in the community. And what for you, what's really cool is, Dani, the athlete, couldn't hide it, right? And so Dani, the athlete, was out there, right? And then you had sort of Dani, the normal citizen. And at some point in that high school, that it became one, right? You kind of you weren't kind of trying to play two sides of it. So that's really sweet. And your friends, it sounds like we're pretty critical there.
Yes, definitely. And they helped also a lot and I think this helped me at least build more confidence about it, is we would joke about it. And a lot of people sometimes they'll get uncomfortable when you make a joke about amputee or something you're not able to do. But we would just start making so many jokes, because there are a lot of little things that happen in a daily basis that are kind of funny when you think about it, about missing a limb. Whether it's like someone asking you to do something that you most clearly cannot, and just not even dawning on them like, oh, wait, you can't do that. They have one hand, or XYZ. And so that's something I've taken moving forward, and I took into college, was I can make jokes about this. And I think you can only really make jokes about it, about something that you have to come to terms with. So if you haven't come to terms with it, it's probably hard to like poke at yourself and make fun of yourself like that. But once you've come to terms with the disability, if you're able to joke about it, I think it just makes life lighter, more enjoyable. And I think that the other people that you're surrounded with then are also more comfortable with your disability.
I think that's right. I mean, humor has a way of kind of helping us all understand things. And so I think it's great that you use humor as well. So what sports were you playing in high school? And then talk to me about the decision of like, what do you focus on in college and kind of what were your options?
In high school, I entered primarily focused on soccer, basketball, and softball. So I was going back-to-back seasons in high school. And I really enjoyed those three sports. I was probably the most successful at softball through high school. Are
you serious? The sport that like you...
Yeah. It's because people always laugh, but I took the catching the ball with my right hand, taking it off and throwing it very seriously, where I would just spend hours in front of like the TV, just going like this.
So you were so fast.
I tried to get it down to be as fast as possible. Batting was definitely more difficult. I would bat on the left side to do backhanded rather than trying to gain enough power going traditionally right. And I just genuinely couldn't generate. I was also a very small person, so I couldn't generate a lot of power. So I focused on and spent so much time with private coaches and training, being strictly a bunter and a slap hitter. And so that kind of became my bread and butter. But I think why I was most successful at it, I played outfield and I was starting on varsity my sophomore year of high school in left field. Was I just didn't have any fear when it came to catching a ball. So I would run anywhere, I would dive, I would do anything. And I loved it. I really enjoyed softball growing up. But it was my junior year. I was kind of feeling unsure about my soccer career, and I'd been playing since I was 3 years old. So it had already been 14 years of playing. And my coach, who ended up becoming, my teacher, who ended up becoming my cross country coach, was like, "You're playing midfield in soccer. You should try out running. You're running probably 5 to 6 miles a game as a midfielder, an outside midfielder. You should look into running." And I truly thought the idea of just running was absurd. Like to me, a sport, you needed to have another skill, and running was a part of it. I just had a hard concept that people were going out and running 3 miles.
You're like, where's the ball? Where's the ball? Where's the bat? Where's the stuff? Right?
Yeah. Where's the equipment? And I decided to try out the summer prior to my junior year, just going to some of the cross country practices. And to my surprise, I was doing okay. And so I decided to go out for the cross country team. And I don't think people expected a lot, me coming in as a junior and just being brand new to the program where there's already 70 athletes in it. But somehow I think I just didn't know what I was doing. So I just ran. And I didn't have any game plans or any type of strategy, but I just ran. And I did well. And I was, for the remaining 2 years of my high school career, I was either running number 1 or number 2 for my varsity team. And because I had success in it, they said when springtime came, they said, "You have to do track and field now." And I was like, "Oh, I don't want to do track and field. That looks so boring. Like, at least with cross country, we're out in nature and getting to have some diversity,
You're in our..." Such a funny, opinionated athlete at this time of your life, right?
Yeah, I was like, you do like this? That sounds so boring. But they said, if you want to be successful in the fall, you should do track and field. And so I gave up softball to do track and field. And again, had some early success, managed to make it to state in my first year in the 2-mile race. And I ran anything from like the joke 4x4 that they'd make the distance runners run. And the 800, the mile, and the 2-mile were the 3 I was focused on. And coming into my senior year, again, I was totally focused academically, but I still wanted to pursue my athletic career. But I genuinely didn't think I would be good enough to play a college sport. All these other athletes at my high school, were doing early commitments and verbal commitments and going on all these tours with universities. And I knew, like, for softball, basketball, soccer, my odds of at least doing Division I were absolutely none, maybe Division III or NAIA or something like that. Right. But yeah, I was like, I'm going to college for academics. Sports, I'll leave behind. Like, and then after my first year of running, I started getting some recruitment letters. I was like, okay, I've only been doing this a year. I don't know if they're sending these to the right person. Like, I'm fast for my area, but probably not nationwide. And I continued to, receive some letters. And so some of the schools that I was looking at academically, I said, okay, maybe there's no harm in emailing the coach. And so I started emailing some coaches of some of these Division I schools I was looking at. And I started getting some response and some interest. And I was somewhat stunned because, again, I had been only doing the sport for a year. And I ultimately came down to a decision for college that had two schools that I would be running at as a preferred walk-on, or a strictly academic school. And I ended up choosing Butler University in Indianapolis, and I was going to run there. And I was excited but nervous to do a college sport because, again, entering my freshman year of college, that was my third year running. So a ton of these other athletes were like going to Nike Cross Nationals since, they were middle schoolers, and Foot Locker regionals and all these huge nationwide running events. And I was like, oh, I've done 2 seasons of cross country before. Like, I don't know if I belong here. But yeah, I ran the entirety of my freshman year at Butler. I ran cross country, indoor track, and outdoor track. And due to some knee issues, I started dislocating my kneecap that year. Ooh. And yeah, I'm still suffering the consequences to this day.
Are you serious?
Yeah, surgery is probably on the horizon sooner than I'd want. Aww. But yeah, it's been 7 years now of this issue and yes, due to some injuries, just finally being in college, like away from my family, just seeing that at the end of the day, I didn't think at the time I'd have a long-term career in running. I decided to leave the team after freshman year and focus on academics, let my body somewhat heal up a little bit, and focus strictly on my career. So it was quite an odd way to get to Division I sports because, again, I wasn't being heavily recruited initially because I was just so late to enter the sport in high school. And so it was very much to my shock that, like, I even was able to reach that level in the sport that early on into my career.
Is there any part of you that regrets not trying to complete your collegiate career?
Yes and no. I say yes because I think if I'd still gotten into Paralympic track and field and I competed through college, I'd probably be in a much better place than I was hopping in after basically 4 years of not competing. But at the same time, I view it as sometimes a blessing because it allowed me then to have maybe a more typical college experience without elite level athletics. And now that I am participating in elite sport again, and that's all of my focus, I am happy that I had those few years to just like be a 20-year-old and not be so regimented and so strict on everything to be the best at my sport. I'm glad I had a few years to just be, a young adult and do different things and travel and get to just like enjoy all of college.
Well, you're kind of a rare athlete that did the D1 thing, right? And in fact, you were running that basically your whole freshman year. There was not a lot of breaks.
It was an off time.
Basically doing 3 seasons, right? So you've got that experience, but then you actually had a normal college life for a few years there too, which I think is really, you would be a really good advisor for athletes coming up and trying to make a decision about what to do. And because like, because it's hard, right? The sacrifices are real.
Real.
Right? I mean, that freshman year probably for you, when you look back, is very different than the last 3 years.
Totally. And now I would say my biggest piece of advice is to always pick the college despite the sport. I definitely picked Butler because of the running opportunities. And I ended up loving my experience and having a great time, but it didn't fit the things I'd written out that I wanted in a university in terms of size and location and things like that. And I sacrificed those things because for sport.
Yeah.
And whether it's someone who, like me, was maybe somewhat newer to the sport, so they don't know if they love it when they enter it. But with any athlete who's going to college to play sport, like, it's just the harsh truth that it can be ripped away in a second. Injury, or who knows, maybe a new coaching staff. There's so many things, scholarship.
Yes. So your point is, because sport is not something that you can depend on, make sure that the college is a place that you would be happy at without sport.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And even for, the most elite level recruits in the US, again, like, an injury can be detrimental to your career, and you could walk off your sophomore year and not have your sport anymore. Do you want to transfer schools, or do you love your school enough despite not having that sport? So that's my biggest bit of advice. And I think I've seen it. I knew quite a few athletes at my school and other schools who either quit their sport because of different reasons and either chose to stay or chose to transfer. And so I just hope that everyone can always love their school first, and then the sport is like the cherry on top to the school.
Well, in the adaptive sports world, we have a similar but different problem when you think about college. And the similarity is, I think people tend to sub-optimize their college by sort of prioritizing sport. Like, that happens a lot in the adaptive world, because there aren't many schools
with adaptive programs.
Yeah, like, there aren't that many programs. I mean, there's whatever, you can count them on, two hands. The like legitimate programs. And so, and there aren't that many like more elite universities that offer adaptive sports. And so a really smart kid coming up might not go to a top 20 school, even if they got in, because they don't have the right sport opportunities. So it's hard. It's such a hard decision, obviously, no matter what. But I sometimes feel like our kids coming up through the adaptive sports world sub-optimize education, which is kind of aligned with what you were saying.
Definitely.
I'd like to take a quick break to show you how you can get involved as a volunteer with Angel City Sports.
Are you interested in supporting Angel City Sports? We're seeking volunteers to help organize clinics and events, as well as support our athlete outreach efforts, marketing and media, and even fundraising and development. All skill sets and backgrounds are welcome in support of our mission to provide free adaptive sport opportunities for children, adults, and veterans with physical disabilities or visual impairments. For our younger athletes, we welcome you to join the Angel City Youth Leadership Council. Middle and high school age students are eligible to join the Youth Leadership Council, where you will learn about the disabled community by working side by side with our athletes and acquire important skills such as teamwork, leadership, philanthropy, and event management. To sign up for our volunteer newsletter and stay up to date on all upcoming opportunities, visit angelcitysports.org.
Okay, I want to shift into get a little bit around your work experience post college, but I think I read in one of your bios or summaries or whatever somewhere online that you were aware of Paralympics in college, but you didn't really make any moves towards it. Is that right? Where was that first awareness? Where did that come from?
The first touch point I ever received was actually in high school, and Kathy Sellers.
Oh, okay. Got it.
An All-American letter. And I don't think we kept it because from Paralympic track and field, and we thought it was a mistake that they sent it because we truly didn't really appreciate that I was a part of the Paralympic world. And so, yeah, I went on, ran, and I'd heard a little bit of chatter, and I did some Googling myself and saw a little bit about it. But again, wasn't just in a place to probably even consider it at the time, and B, just didn't really appreciate what it was.
Yeah.
So it was while I was working in Salt Lake City at my job for the Utah Jazz that I did a little more Googling, and then a familiar face in the adapt world, Sarah Carey, she reached out and we started having a conversation, and she was obviously very involved in Paralympic track with her daughter, Annie, and Annie was going to the same high school that I went to in Boise. And she's truly one of the people I accredit all of this to, because she's the one who really got me involved and talked to me about opportunities that could be available. And so I knew I was aware of the Paralympic movement, but I truly wasn't really aware until about 6 months into my career.
And so I know Sarah Carey really well. I served on a board with her and known Annie for a long time. So that first meet that you and I met at, which was in Chula Vista, was that your first meet? And did Sarah sort of recommend you show up there just to get in front of the coaches?
So I started training in January of 2019 while I was working, and I was able to hop into a college meet that spring in Utah, an able-bodied meet. Yeah. And then I did a few time trials, but that was my first para meet where I met you at Chula Vista.
Yeah.
Sarah was definitely one who helped me kind of find meets, because the whole process, as you know, especially if you don't have a mentor or
it's so complicated,
so confusing, and
so complicated.
Finding approved meets and classification. So that was one of my first para meets, and she had also gotten me in contact with David Gregg.
Sure.
From Paris Sports Spokane. And he would just text me occasionally, this is the meets we've been thinking about going to, these ones are approved. And so they were both very helpful in helping me get that process started. And when I went to Chula Vista and where I met you, I didn't even know that was an Olympic training site. I had no concept of any of it. I just kind of flew to San Diego because I saw it was an approved meet. I think that day, there was only one other person in the race with me. It was pretty empty, but I got to meet finally Coach Cruz and a few other people in the world. And I know that was definitely Coach Cruz's first experience with me. And so I think that meet probably helped put me at least a little bit more on the radar, even though I had only been training at that point for 6 months for the event while still working full time. So I was definitely not looking probably the most promising 400 runner, but it was very, early on in my career of running.
So that meet, is that the first time you're sort of surrounded by people with disabilities?
The first time I was surrounded by people with disabilities was actually just a little bit earlier that spring. So I had been introduced to a nonprofit called Nubability Athletics, which is a sports camp designed strictly for people with limb differences or amputees. And they were holding a ski camp in Boise, which is where I'm originally from. And the coach and founder had gotten in contact and asked if I wanted to volunteer. I said yes, I was available that weekend. And since I had started trying to become more involved in potentially making a team for Tokyo, I was I need to do more adaptive sports things. Right now I train alone. I don't really know a ton of people in Salt Lake where I was living with disabilities. I need to start trying to find organizations so I can not only grow as an athlete, but grow as a member of this community now that I realize I am a part of this adaptive community. And I remember walking into a room where there was probably 15 kids with limb differences and 6 limb different coaches. And I was just is this what I look like? I was so stunned that like seeing another amputee, especially one who had a similar arm as me, it was just like astounding to me, because again, it's like one thing to see a photo of yourself or see yourself in the mirror, but then to like see almost what you look like on another person, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And I almost felt like I didn't really belong, to be honest, at first, even though I knew like technically these are my people. Like we have this similarity. I grew up mostly around able-bodied people. So for me, it was kind of like a hard pill to swallow to first step into that room of other amputees and feel like I belonged. I almost felt like an outsider for the first time. And it was an interesting experience. And it was really overwhelming that first time. And to be honest, at that moment, I was like, do I want to be involved in all this? Or should I go back to my job within my able-bodied peers, you know, going back to what I've always known? And over the weekend, it definitely helped the more time I spent and the more I just realized, oh, they're just, you know, normal people like me. They just look a little bit different. And it almost took me like a little bit to train my eyes to like see another amputee. And it was an odd experience, but I'm very grateful for it, because then moving forward, I think I was just so much more accustomed to seeing other people with disabilities. And it no longer became like this different thing to be like, oh my gosh, another person with a limb difference or whatever. It just became like, oh, just another person. And so it was an odd experience, I'll say.
So this is, man, you're getting into something that I'm very passionate about. So if you like, there was a risk that you showed up at that event and walked away and never came back. There was like, it sounds like you were close.
Yes.
You know, you made a commitment for the weekend. Okay. Maybe you stayed for the weekend, but like your brain, right, was sort of telling you, I need to get out of this. Right. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. So if you think about that experience, you think about your childhood, or listen, let's put your expertise and guidance on a family that's brand new, right? A baby's born with your disability. When do you do this? When do you bring them into the movement, whether it's an amputee camp or Angel City Games, or, you know, like when do you do that, you know, in your mind? Because it's almost like by waiting so long, you were almost so pre-programmed. It was a real leap of faith for you, right? So when in your mind is ideal, should we do it early? You know, so it's like no big deal. Like, okay, whatever. It's just a bunch of amputees hanging out, running on a track or skiing or whatever they're doing, right? It's like no big deal, which is the reality, right?
Totally.
Like, what's your advice?
I don't have probably the answer, because I see it. I think it's probably different for each individual, but I've seen some families, I think, do a really good job about it. Like Sarah Carey, for example, I think she's done an excellent job of integrating Annie into her adaptive sports world. She has friends with a variety of disabilities, but then she has friends from high school, and she runs on her high school team, and they're all able-bodied. And so I think I see a balance, whereas yes, I was probably one way too far extreme, but I think sometimes I see maybe the other extreme where kids who get involved with adaptive sports at such a young age and are always surrounded by other people with disabilities, that sometimes they might have then a hard time, particularly socially, entering the able-bodied world. And so I'm sure I'm sure it's different for everyone, but the fine balance of like letting them have exposure to both communities, so they realize like everyone's just people. Like, it's not weird to be missing a limb, but it's also not weird to not be. Like, we're all just people. So having exposure to both that, and hopefully, you know, having a positive experience, obviously, in the able-bodied community, and hoping you do find a good group that isn't going to be bullying your child or XYZ, but finding that fine balance of like, they're just part of this world, so they can be a part of both communities.
I absolutely love what you just said. And it is, I didn't know you were going to go there, but that's sort of what I say to people, right? Which is, if you can stay balanced, stay balanced.
Yeah.
It's not always possible. So it's really hard for a blind kid to integrate into mainstream sports. Really hard for a kid in a chair. There are certain disabilities, or even an ambulatory CP that's severe. Yeah. There's certain disabilities that are very hard. And so do it as long as you can until it affects the self-confidence, and then you get out of that. But like, I like what you said, because I think that's right. Because you don't want to hurt your ability to integrate socially into able-bodied society, right? Because you're so in your little cocoon of adaptive sports, which is like, you know, the way I think about it too, adaptive sports should be giving you the confidence, right? The sense of belonging, and the sort of the strength and courage to go out and do those things with the rest of society, whether it's go to school, get a job, you know, be an entrepreneur, whatever you're going to do, right? Because the world isn't all disabled. So you got to deal with the world, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That's great. That's really good. Really good. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your run up to Tokyo. So you kind of emerge on the scene. Perfect timing, frankly, for the 2020 games. You had a little over a year to get ready for Tokyo. It's delayed. You got interested in winter, and I thought you were not doing
You thought
Tokyo.
I was done with track.
I thought you had kind of abandoned us on the track side, and then sure enough, you're there, right? So talk to me a little bit about that and this is just from California, my little weird window on your career, but like, what would happen in that 2019 to 2021 window? And obviously, I mean, you made the team, you made the games, is awesome. So like, how'd you do that?
So I had started lightly training January of 2019, which now that I look back, if the games had happened in 2020, I did not give myself very much time to prepare for those games, only a year and a half to basically learn an entire new event in track, because I never trained for the 400 prior. And that summer I got to do some races, start to feel it out a little bit. I went into the fall continuing to train. And at that point, I decided to leave my full-time job. I was able to find a part-time position in my organization. But obviously, to do so, I had to take a significant pay cut. I lost all my full-time benefits, 401k, healthcare, like all of it, with this idea to make the Tokyo team. So it was a big risk, again, only giving myself a year and a half and giving up my career to train for this. And that fall, thanks to Sarah Carey, Annie had gone to a U.S. Paralympics Nordic developmental ski camp. And the head developmental coach, Beth Ann Chamberlain, her main job was finding, because Nordic is such a niche, small sport, was to find other athletes from sports that they think they could integrate well into the Nordic program. And she had talked to Sarah. Sarah had been talking about some other athletes she thought might be good. And Beth Ann got in contact with me and said, we're going to host this clinic in Colorado in December. Would you like to come 5 days, try out Nordic? Like, if you hate it, then you got, to ski for 5 days in a beautiful part of our country. If you don't, like, we can talk about maybe where we can go. And so I went to this camp. I didn't expect much. I thought it was honestly just like a week break from track, winter training for track in December of 2019. But I hopped on Nordic skis with a few of the US coaches, and I got pretty hooked pretty fast because it brought me back to cross country running. And endurance.
Oh, really? You like, it kind of gave you that same high that.
Yep. The runner's high that honestly you don't have time to feel in the 400, but I definitely would always feel in long distance running. And it was kind of a whirlwind of a week. And 2 weeks later, they were hosting the US Paralympics Nationals. And it was in Heber City, Utah, which was about 40 minutes from where I was living at the time. And they said, hey, you should compete at nationals. And I was like, I got on skis for the first time 2 weeks ago. Like, I don't think you want me competing there. And they explained, like, we don't have a ton of people competing. Our program's super small. Like, don't worry, you won't embarrass yourself. You'll probably have like max a few people in your race. Just like come and do it.
By the way, your reaction to that is this: you have this feeling like you're not an athlete, you don't fit in. You had the same feeling when you arrived at Butler, like, oh, yeah. I'm not, But look at you, you're making it happen. Okay, so do you do trials?
I do. I do the Paralympic Nationals. I do okay, but they then sent me home with like some skis to borrow and then connected me to some people in the Salt Lake community who were related to Paralympic Nordic. And so for the remainder of the winter before COVID hit, I was focused on training for track. And then about once a week, I'd meet up with one of these para-related people and then just ski. But skiing is the most technical thing, cross-country skiing. And it is so challenging to learn the technique. Like, I study the technique still to this day. And they say for cross-country skiing to get good at technique will be 4 to 6 years. Like, it is a long time. And there's two different styles of skiing. So you're learning classic skiing and skating. And it's a lot. So while I was able to, kind of like fake my way through it, my technique wasn't amazing. And, but I couldn't commit at the time in early 2020 that much effort to it because I was like, Tokyo's this summer. Like, that's our first goal. Then we'll worry about skiing after. The delay happens and I continued to focus on track. Through the summer, I was still luckily where I was living, able to use a strength facility. I found a new track coach at the University of Utah, and I was able to train all summer and start, gearing up for hopefully 2021. Much to my surprise, in late 2020, the director of the US Paralympic Nordic program said, we obviously didn't have that many races last year. Like, you haven't gotten to ski a lot, but how would you like to come train with our team full time this winter? We're up in Bozeman, Montana. We're basing the program out of here. Like, we'll house you, just come and train with us. And it was a hard decision for me to make because I've been living in Utah the past few years. I just got a track coach I really enjoyed. And Tokyo is the following summer. Like, do I give up a full 4 or 5 months of track training to go up to a different place to pursue this other sport? And it was a tough decision, but it was, to a certain extent, it was almost like an offer I couldn't refuse to have this opportunity. And I went up to Bozeman and I lived there full time to train from December through the end of March of 2020 into 2021. And unfortunately in Bozeman, like, there was no indoor track. We couldn't use the indoor strength facility. So I was just trying to do some runs through the snow, but the track was covered in ice. And I wasn't able to get onto a track, I think, until the second week of March consistently.
Oh my gosh.
I was super nervous that I put myself in a bad place for Tokyo by pursuing skiing.
Yeah. But
now that I look back, like, I probably wouldn't have, if I hadn't done that winter last year in Bozeman, I wouldn't have this potential of making Beijing. And I was able to do one World Cup last year in Europe. So I got my first time to internationally ski race. And I learned so much being immersed there that I would never have gotten probably if I stayed training for track and skiing once a week. But yeah, I made a quick transition. Basically, I had a week off in between our last ski race at the end of March and then the first track race I went to in April of this year. And I started working with a coach at Montana State University. And we tried to basically use the huge endurance base I built from the ski season to work for the 400. So I probably started out pretty untraditional and I was trying to get speed work in, but I definitely knew at the time, like, my biggest advantage I have right now is I have a base like no other, but I just don't have speed.
Yeah.
And so we try to, from March or April 1st to trials on June 17th, 18th, 19th, like we have to try to find some speed. And I was racing almost every single weekend, traveling to Spokane and Texas and Arizona and California for races and just trying to get into track shape. But I was truly worried that I wasn't in a place to make Tokyo. And my times through the whole season leading up to trials were the exact same. I was always running to the same decimal point. And I was getting so frustrated. I was like, I need just a big drop in one of these times to feel comfortable. And I never got that. So going into trials, I truly, not that I wasn't putting in my fullest effort, but I just was like, I need to be realistic. I don't want to let myself down. I'm probably not making this team. And much to my surprise, and probably everyone else's, I somehow did. And I was almost sad because I was like, I feel guilty that I'm making this team when I didn't have a trials race that I'm proud of. But now I have to take this moving forward to try to get in a good place for Tokyo.
And talk to me about what your expectations for Tokyo were going in. How'd you do against them?
Tokyo was the first time I've ever internationally competed in Paralympic track. And to be honest, it was the first time I actually had a full race of people of my disability and of my classification. Because in the US, there's 2 other girls that have my same classification, and they weren't usually running the 400. So the entirety of me running the 400 was either against people of other classifications, empty races, or able-bodied. Like,
by the way, this issue really bothers me, and it's why I am motivated to grow our Angel City Games presented by the Hartford into like thousands of athletes. Because if you can scale it up, then segmenting by age, gender, disability, and event, you can actually have heats of similar athletes. And right now, you're right. You're just comparing your times against people. You're never one-to-one, which really is unfortunate. It's just a numbers game. We just need more numbers.
Yeah, totally. And that's, definitely what I've seen the issue, not only in the US, but worldwide, is finding enough people to be able to compete. And that's why obviously classifications are combined and things like that. But Tokyo was going to be my first international meet. And I was realistic. Like at this point, I'd probably run the 400 10 to 12 times in a race. So not a lot. I'd only been training now for about 2 years. And I just, again, like my body was not born to be a sprinter, I don't think. And it's not my natural inclination. My natural inclination is distance running. So I was kind of faking being a sprinter and trying my best to get to a certain place. But I can see the times of how the world is ranked. I was ranked 12th going into Tokyo. And so it was realistic. And this summer I had to make, unfortunately, a decision that hopefully no athlete has to make, but I had to decide, do I forget about skiing for the rest of the summer leading into Tokyo, just do track and then come back and start from scratch for skiing? Or do I have to take a little bit of both and try to put myself in a place where both are accomplishable, but maybe, if I hadn't done this extra stuff for skiing, maybe I could have taken half a second off my 400, like who knows? And so I had to, unfortunately, somewhat mesh 2 training plans. I did as much speed work as I could for track, but then I probably did a little bit too much longer based things, based things that a 400 wouldn't need. But I had to think forward 6 months later, I'd be skiing 15 kilometers. So it was definitely an interesting summer of trying to train for both. Unfortunately, in Tokyo, my goal truly was to run a PR. Like this was my first time with head-to-head competition. Like I want to run a PR, but let's be real. These girls are really fast and they have way more experience under their belt than me in this race. Like we're not going to sit here and say, I want to medal when numbers don't lie. I can look at the numbers.
Sure.
Unfortunately, my Tokyo race did not go as I hoped for PRing. And it was an odd experience. I remember talking to you and Ezra after it. And since it was like my first experience competing internationally for track, I was definitely nervous, the Olympic stadium. Obviously there wasn't fans, but still it's just a loud, like light filled place, pretty jaw dropping. And
I know even without fans in the stands, right? It still had something in there. It was powerful.
Yeah, it was very powerful.
Yeah.
And I remember, having this conversation with you and Ezra after and explaining, I was like, it was so odd. It's almost, I was so nervous that I numbed everything to such a point that I don't remember racing. Like I genuinely I remember walking in and then I remember finishing the race and just being like, oh, wait, oh, shoot, it's over. Did I just run or what just happened? It was so crazy. And talking to Coach Cruz after even, he was like, it seems like you weren't there. And I was like, I don't think I was.
Oh, wow.
It was almost like I tried mentally to calm nerves, but I did it to such a point where I like blacked out the race and numbed everything. And as much as it sucks, and the next day I was just like, are you serious? Like that 60 seconds of my life was for all of this, was for that 60 seconds that I don't even remember. And like, I ran the slowest time of my season at the Paralympic Games. Like, what the heck? But now obviously I'm like trying to view it in a more positive light and be like, maybe I needed to have that experience. So something in the future, I learned from that mentally. So now hopefully I won't have to experience something like that at that level in the future. So I'm trying to flip the narrative and use it as a learning experience. It's just unfortunate that my first Paralympic Games, that had to be a tough learning experience to go through. But
listen, Dani, I give you a lot of credit because even, I mean, we saw you soon after your race. Yeah. I don't know how, but like you never seem to let it really get in your head. You seem to like be like positive. You seem to see the better, right? The learnings. Like, I just feel like you, and I'm sure there's always like moments where you're second guessing yourself, but like, I think your perspective going in was amazing. And what these are all just like building blocks, right? Yeah. In Ezra's case, that same spring we met you, he did Junior Worlds, he did Pan American Games, and then he went to the World Championships. So, he had 3 big high visibility meets under his belt before, the Paralympics. And again, he's a lot younger, but still like every experience builds on, the prior experience. So like you probably have improved your success chances for Beijing massively, and probably, even Paris. Right. So, I just love your attitude. You're just so cool and so chill about stuff.
I'm not always chill and hill. Don't worry.
No, I know you're a really serious athlete and you're so determined. Yeah. So that's like, but you also, I don't know, you're just light about these things, which is beautiful, right? Because there's no sense in crying over spilled milk at this point.
Yeah,
right?
Totally. And obviously, people don't see everything. Like when I got back from Tokyo, I mean, I almost continued to numb the rest of the experience. And I had just had a breakdown one day where I was like, what did I just go through? Like, not even just that race, but like the whole experience. I just never could process it.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's like, maybe I had to go through all that to be better for the upcoming games and be better as a person and learn, how to handle these high stress things. But I do think sometimes, and like, that's the attitude I always try to have is, especially like coming into ski season, people, especially I notice with cross-country ski and biathlon, are so routine driven. Like on race day, they have to eat these certain things and they have to listen to this certain song in order, to be in the mental place to shoot and stuff like that. But I try to take more of a chill approach. Again, not saying by lack of effort, but I never want to be like so set on certain things that I can't be flexible and I can't adapt to scenarios. So I'm like, okay, like if I can't eat this certain food on race day, like that's okay. Like it's not going to ruin my day. And like, if for shooting, we have a bad 0 because of wind, like it's okay. We're going to overcome it. Like, I just want to take, like you said, a more like relaxed approach to certain things instead of always being so high strung about it, because then I think it will put me in a worse place to be able to adapt in different scenarios and be able to, adapt to a bad race, or how do I respond to these things?
And you know yourself better than anybody. So you know what you need. And some people might know that they need to be super regimented, or they will regret something. And if you need to be light and, a little more flexible, that makes sense. Tell me, and I can't wait to hear this, but tell me what your sport dreams are when it comes to the Paralympics. Like, how long do you want to compete? Are you going to keep doing summer, winter going forward? Do you think you can make that balance? Like, what do you want to accomplish sport-wise?
Good question. I loved the summer, winter. Obviously, this year was unique with the delay and the 6-month gap, but I have really good mentors right in front of me every day who are summer, winter, Aaron Pike, Kendall Gretsch, and Oksana Masters. I literally get to witness every single day who are training for 2 sports. And it's really unique that our Paralympic Nordic program right now has potentially the only 4 who will qualify for both games are all Nordic skiers. So I think it also is something to show for our program that they are willing to be adaptable and be willing to work with other teams. And I think they see it as a pro. And that's something I'm really grateful for. I mean, upcoming, obviously qualify for Beijing. My ultimate dream for Beijing, again, I'm realistic. I know I've been skiing for 2 years, and like some of these people, particularly Eastern Europeans, have been skiing since the time they can walk. Like, they just have more experience under their belt. And it's not discrediting me as an athlete, but again, I need a few years to learn the sport. Like, I know I have a good engine. I know I'm a good endurance athlete, but that can only get me so far in the sport. I need to learn how to ski and have good technique, because then that will propel me. So I know my conversations with my ski coach already are Beijing is a stepping stool, and like our big spotlight, the thing we want to focus on is Milan 2026. I'll have more years under my belt. I'll be older. I'll be more mature. Like, I'll get more international experience the next few years. Like, Milan will probably be the big thing for me to look forward to in this sport. Skiing wise, I mean, some of them are like 40 still skiing. So who knows how long it can last me. We'll see how long my body can keep up without breaking. In terms of summer sport, like, I really, really want to continue summer sport, but I'm trying to just like focus right now on Beijing. And then after Beijing is over, see what comes. I don't know with my running career what it really holds. Everyone kind of knows this in the para-track world, but like, I don't love the 400. And just unfortunately, my category doesn't offer any further longer distance events. And so if, they were to be able to open even an 800 for my category, that's something I'd totally pursue. And I'm not ruling out track and field anymore, but I don't know. I want to do summer sports, but I might be flexible about what I do, I guess.
There you go. All right. Yeah. I like it. All right. We're almost at the end. We're at our soul searching, where this is sort of rapid fire. I'm going to throw a bunch of questions at you. What's a fun or interesting fact about you that I don't know?
I'm obsessed with McDonald's, and I once ate McDonald's 25 days in a row.
Good to know about you. What has your disability taught you?
My disability has taught me that despite circumstances, you can really do anything you put your mind to. And I think my disability has introduced me to a community that has taught me so much about inclusion and diversity, and how we can make this world a better place for not just one population, but all the populations in it.
What have you learned from the bigger mistakes you've made in your life?
Oh boy. I have learned that despite some mistakes and hard times, that everything's going to get better. Like, in the moment, so often we think like, this is the end of the world for me. Nothing can get better from here. But with time really does heal all wounds. So giving yourself time, like there's so much to look forward to, and it's going to be okay at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's good. That's good for all of us to remember. What stresses you out?
Oh, a lot stresses me out.
Not eating McDonald's every day?
Not eating McDonald's, no. I've been good. Dietitians, don't love that fact about me. What stresses me out is sometimes not having control and having to accept the things I can't change.
Okay, that's good. What's your life philosophy? And if you don't have one, is there a quote that you sort of try to live by?
The quote I really enjoy. My parents started reading it to me when I was a young kid in sports, and, sometimes might have had some more difficult challenges because of my disability, is by John Wooden. And it's, don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. So always trying to flip the narrative of like, yeah, maybe I can't do this, but I could do it this way. Or maybe I just can't do this at all. That's okay. I can do other things.
I love a good Wooden quote, man. That's great. All right. This might be tricky. Everyone has a different relationship with this word, but what do you think your purpose is?
Oh, good question. I think a lot about purpose now, especially leaving my career and getting into Paralympic sport. And as we've talked through this, not knowing much about disability, not identifying with it for a long time, I think my purpose, I don't think my purpose is to be on a national team or win a medal or do something like that. But I think my purpose is to represent something bigger than myself, whether it's our country, whether it is our community, whether it's our particular team, and to hopefully make others feel loved and included, whether that's even my competitors. I'm a big, I'll hug my competitors, even if I'm pissed at them during the race afterwards. I'll high five them. I stay in contact with some of them. So just spreading a loving, inclusive attitude wherever I go, and always making people feel welcome and cared about.
Okay. With that answer, you really have to come to our games, because that is, even if you end up quitting track, because that's the spirit. This is exactly what we're trying to foster and create this warm, fun, loving, accessible environment, especially for new athletes. And so we always need elites to come back and mentor and support newer athletes.
Sure. I'd love to come.
Okay. Wrap up. You get the microphone to cover whatever you might have missed. Final thoughts, whatever you got.
I don't know. Everyone tune into the Paralympic Games, March 4th through the 13th. It's going to be very exciting.
Wait, when do you know if you're on the team for sure? Do they select the team in January, or when do they?
To be honest, it's a super confusing process. We don't have a trials. So you basically can just earn points and qualify throughout the season. So probably honestly, officially mid-February, we'll have named our team, maybe sooner.
So late. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay.
But yeah, we're kind of through different World Cups, international competitions. We are trying to qualify this whole season. Luckily, our women's team, at least, we have a fair amount of spots for the amount of women we have competing right now. So we're all really hopeful for our chances. But yeah, that's kind of my understanding. But it's hard because there's no black and white answer. There's no just trials determines the team type of thing. So it's somewhat more of a process, I guess. But coming up, we do have sit ski nationals. Some of us are doing able-bodied ski team nationals, and there's nothing like getting your butt kicked by a ton of collegiate Division I skiers when you've been skiing for 2 years. But that's also, I think, where we can grow a lot as skiers. And then some of us will head to World Championships in Lillehammer, Norway. And for one of the first times, they're combining it with World Championships for para-alpine and para-snowboard. So all three will be taking over Norway together at the same event. So that'll be super cool.
That's fantastic. Okay. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
We're rooting for you, and we'll drop this along with some other episodes covering winter athletes in the run up to Beijing. So hopefully it'll give people a little bit of people to cheer for when Beijing shows up on NBC. Lastly, where can people find you or follow you on social or on the web?
On social media, all of my handles right now are at the One Arm Dan, spelled out ONE. And my website's DaniAravich.com. That just has a little bit of a bio about me. It talks about some of my partners for the upcoming season. But yeah, so kind of those two places. And hopefully I'll be posting more this season. Hopefully, the photographers from our winter events will actually get me photos so I can post about what's coming up. And then there'll be hopefully a lot of stuff on the Team USA page about us all leading into the Winter Games.
Fantastic. Dani, thank you for your time. It is, for anyone listening to the show, it is Christmas Eve of all days of the year. And Dani and I are in our rooms doing this interview. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for what you've done for Team USA. Keep grinding. Let's make that Beijing team. Yes. And we will be cheering you on all the way, and excited to have you out at the games next summer. So let's make that a date.
Yes, for sure. Thank you, Clayton.
All right. Thanks, Dani.
Thank you all for listening. Our show is produced by Angel City Sports. I'm Clayton Freck, the executive producer, and the team behind the show includes Dave Pantano, our producer and editor, Mackenzie Soldan, our marketing manager, and the theme song was performed by adaptive artist Tony Memel.